Hey everybody, it's Christian Buckley doing another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm talking today with Echo. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. And for folks that don't know you, who are you, where are you, and what do you do?
My name is Echo Swinford. I'm in the Indianapolis suburbs. I've been here forever, it feels like, and I am a PowerPoint MVP. So I own Echosvoice. It's a PowerPoint consultancy, I guess you would call it. We do presentation makeovers, all kinds of things, but I specialize in PowerPoint templates, creating branded PowerPoint templates for corporations. That's what I'm
I
known
can
for.
just say that that's still one of those things where it's like a love-hate thing with PowerPoint. It's like I
Oh, yeah.
love it as a tool and using it, and so I have some decks that I've created over the years that I'm very proud of. Um, and then other times where I'm just like, I need this, I need to look better, and I'm watching videos on how to do different things and can't get it just right, and it's frustrating where I want to hand it off to a vendor, just like make this pretty.
Yep. Sometimes it's make this pretty. And I mean, we do a lot of that, but sometimes it's also, help me figure out my story and structure it better or, things like that. So
Yeah.
a lot of times how pretty we can make it really depends on the content that you're putting on there. And that's always the biggest challenge is convincing clients to get things off of the slides and put those in their speaker notes and not put their script on their slide. And if you do
Yeah.
that, then you can make your presentation a lot more visual. That's usually the biggest challenge that I think people have. Yeah.
There's a couple MVPs that are really well known out there. I'm terrible with names to remember, but there was one MVP that used to be annually my first 3 or 4 years as an MVP at the annual MVP summit, the gathering. They would have him come in and present on good storytelling and good presentations. And
Really?
his whole shtick, yeah, I'll have to find the name after we're done recording,
And it
get you the
wasn't one of
name
the
of this guy.
PowerPoint MVPs? Well, that's kind of nasty.
No, no. But is it a gentleman who wrote a number of books? He was like an engineering on the engineering side of things, and but he was really good at public speaking. But he would talk about exactly the points. Is like do not read your slides, do not jam pack your slides with so much information. And so I've gotten better at putting sparse information enough to communicate with images to move it forward and put the detailed notes that I want to make available in the handout notes as part of PowerPoint so that, hey, you print it out, you print it with the notes and you get all that detail.
Mhm.
But
Absolutely.
my favorite presentations were ones where I focused more on the storytelling aspect than I
Mhm.
did on even what was in the slides.
Oh yeah. I mean, I always tell people that, the slides are secondary and I mean there's a lot of different analogies. The one that I heard latest was maybe it was from Eileen Bergelson. I can't remember who said it, but PowerPoint is your wingman and I mean that really is you're the presentation. You don't need any slides. The best presentations I've seen have not had any visuals, to be honest. So, yeah.
Well, if PowerPoint's your wingman and Copilot is your co-pilot,
Yeah,
you've
all
got
the
your
Tom
whole crew.
references there.
Yeah. Well, how do you answer that? Well, I'm sure you're getting that question now. Is just like, well, do I really need help with this? I've got, AI is helping with this. You've got the designer capability.
Mhm.
What else do I need? Doesn't it's kind of like people that uh, there's some videos that are funny, not funny, of people that like are in a big old camper and they put on cruise control thinking it's automation, like it's going to drive, and they get up and walk away from the steering wheel and then
Right,
crash
right,
for some reason.
right. So
I
it's
think
kinda
of
like
that as
that.
like
I mean,
Copilot. Yeah.
Copilot AI, well, I mean, we hear about ChatGPT and how it hallucinates, and Copilot, I'm sure, is going to hallucinate. One of the nice things is that when you use Copilot in PowerPoint, Microsoft will tell you that you need to check it, and you should always check. I mean, you can't just rely. It's just like using Wikipedia. You really need to check those primary sources. You can't just throw it on there and assume that it's correct because you may get burnt. But
Yeah.
with Copilot, in fact, I actually just did a presentation yesterday, 2 days ago. I did a virtual presentation and I did the same presentation 2 weeks prior at a live conference um, about making your PowerPoint templates work with Copilot. Because what is really happening is under the hood, Copilot will generate your slides and do your presentation, but then for the look and feel, it will actually tell you now open Designer for more looks. So what Copilot, at least right now, what it's doing is it's building all your slides on two content layouts. So it'll put your text in there and throw a picture on there, and then it steers you to Designer for more layouts. So what you really need to focus on is making sure that your PowerPoint template will work with Designer. And in that case, when it does that, it will use your branded templates and your OALs, your office assets libraries, and things for your assets to pull it all together. So you can actually use Copilot to help drive the PowerPoint stuff. But one of the things I've been telling people is that, if you think for a living, AI is not going to put you out of business completely, but you really do definitely need to learn to work with it, because the people who can work with AI, Copilot, are going to be able to leverage it to help them in their jobs and be more efficient and do more and, be faster and all the things. But if you don't know how to use it at all, then you might be in trouble. So
yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
Everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so how long have you been an MVP? What was your journey to becoming an MVP?
I have been an MVP for 24 years, I think. 2000, since 2000. Long time.
There you go.
I've been around forever. I mean, I was like, 2 when I started, of course, right? But
yeah, of course. No, that's what I assumed.
So, yeah, last century, which is, around the turn of the century. In the 90s, I was working for a medical education communications company, and I was just doing light office work. I was actually temping. I was between jobs and temping, and we had a couple of symposia coming up for a pharma company, and the owner of the business she was going to outsource all the slide work. And this is in the time of 35 millimeter slides, but she was going to outsource all the work to create the actual slides. And then, we'd send them off to be made into 35 millimeters. And she was worried about the quality of the QC and all of that. And I was like, Deborah, my quality, that no matter what I do, my quality is good. You should let me make your slides. So she's like, all right, let me think about it. And comes back 2 days later and says, okay, go for it. And I'm like, oh crap. I had no idea. I got to learn how to use PowerPoint. Like I knew there was a program, but I had no idea what I was in for. So I started making slides, just like, okay, well, I'll figure this out on the fly. And I really very quickly hit a wall. So I'm dating myself again. Back in the day of Deja News and NTP news groups. Do you remember that? Were you around then? So I got on Deja News. Huh?
Yeah. I was just say that old enough to, like, my first, online experiences were I doing paid BBS. I was a member of two, sharing, doing that like early on with the file sharing platforms, which came a few years later. But yeah,
we are so old, Christian. We are so old, man. Yeah.
Yeah. My first computer was a 286. 486 wasn't even out yet. So that was the time period. Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, I hit Deja News and I started reading religiously. I found the PowerPoint group and I started reading, and eventually I started asking questions. And then eventually, and a few years later, Microsoft made me an MVP. And so I've been kind of they've been stuck with me ever since.
I don't even know how old the MVP program is. Like, is it over 30 years? Is it that old?
Well, I want to say that maybe 1995 were the very first few MVPs. They had just a very small group of them. Like, I want to say 15 or 20. I don't know. And then I think they expanded it a little bit, like
1993.
Yeah. And that'd be about the time I hit the news groups. There were MVPs at that point in time, but the program was really small. And I know that at my first MVP summit, which would have been around 2000, 2001, I think there were like 400 of us. So
this is AI pulling up in search, but it says, the origin. Calvin Saya, a developer, created a list of the most active users on the CompuServe support forum. And he called the list the most verbose people for fun. But in Microsoft, so the first MVPs were awarded in 1994, and they were awarded for Microsoft Access, Visual Basic, and Fox Pro.
Yeah,
And then the
Foxborough.
first MVP summit was in 1996 with 37 attendees.
There you go. So it was very,
There you
very
go.
small, and then it started expanding to the other products. And I think that's maybe why some of the PowerPoint MVPs were MVP. Well, like one of our guys, he's a VBA developer, and so he was around CompuServe in those early days, and so he probably was in that first wave of them. So he's been around an MVP a couple years longer than I have, but yeah,
So I have to say that I was a little bit upset when Excel moved over to the newer Excel that was VB based. So remember
yeah.
when it had its own proprietary macro language that built or that broke all of my reports. I knew that I knew how to move around in that older version, and so was kind of upset when it got
That's fun.
renovated and I had
I
to
mean, it's
rebuild all of my templates.
Yeah, Excel, I mean, I'm surprised because they work really, really hard not to break things, but yeah, yeah.
Well, that was like a foundational change to the application,
Yes.
so I
You
get
know,
that.
2007, I think, was a foundational change also because we went from the old PowerPoint, the binary format, to the XML format. And so
Yep.
Office 2007 was a huge paradigm shift. It was a paradigm shift with how PowerPoint works and templates work. And then they introduced Office themes. And as far as Excel, I mean, the charting engine was completely rewritten. We used to use this old thing called MS Graph. And then in 2007, we actually started getting a more modern charting engine. So the Excel MVPs have been putting up with me since the early 2000s because I've been complaining. I was in the medical space. I was doing charts
Yeah.
all the time. Like my
Yep.
life was data viz, right? And so,
Yep.
yeah, they've been putting up with me for a while.
Yeah,
Thank you.
a little bit.
Any of you are watching.
I started my career as a business analyst and a technical writer, so a lot of what I did, so again, I used all the same tools and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so rather than presenting, usually my end product that's where I learned some basic, HTML, but was, digitizing a lot of documentation, moving it into, an HTML based format or into various publishing
Hmm.
programs and databases. So I got into data warehousing from there. But no, it's
Yeah.
interesting. The evolution. We've been around long enough to see, dramatic changes. I mean,
Yeah.
recently in PowerPoint, the biggest thing, like Designer is fantastic, and there's a lot of other capabilities, but I've not really been paying attention to what's new. Like, what are the hot topics right now? What are you writing about or creating content around?
Well, I mean, honestly, Copilot it's Microsoft's focus and it's kind of where everybody's head is. And so you're starting to see a lot more content come out about Copilot and about AI, things like that. Cameo is another huge thing in PowerPoint, just so that you can insert yourself into your slides and it's not such a disconnect. Working with PowerPoint and Teams, things like that. But for me personally, a couple of years ago, my design partner Julie Turberg, she's another PowerPoint MVP. She and I wrote a book called "Building PowerPoint Templates." We wrote that back in 2012, I think, and because we saw so many bad templates that crossed our desk, we were actually building some of the stock templates that you could download off of like microsofttemplates.com or whatever. We were building some of
Hmm.
those, just building those for Microsoft, and we had to learn about this new paradigm shift and do that. So that was in 2006, 7, 8, like that. So a few years later, we wrote a book, Building PowerPoint Templates, and then we updated that just a couple of years ago. And I do have information about making your templates work with Designer in there, but now I'm starting to focus on how to make them work with Copilot and Designer. So I've been putting out content along those lines. There's been a lot of movement in the font space in PowerPoint as well. They've enabled a font service, so fonts work a lot better than they used to. We don't have as many font substitution issues as we used to. There still are problems, and there still are definite in the weeds solutions, but it's a lot better than
That was a change. I remember hearing about it. I can't remember how, it must have been like a decade ago where Microsoft started like embedding the font. You could have like a customized font or something you purchased somewhere else that was non-standard, and it would embed it so that when you then shared that file, it wouldn't then distort it for somebody that didn't have that locally.
Yeah.
Like that was a big deal. I knew enough. I started in college in the 80s. I was an industrial design student, so design
Oh
and
yeah.
art was a big part of my life. And So the scripting and fonts and that kind of
Mhm.
lettering was an important aspect of that. Took a couple classes on the topic.
So my design partner, Julie Turberg, she was in industrial design. That was in fine arts. That was her
Yep.
area of that was her major, was industrial design. But she's presentation design now and has been for years and years. She's been doing this longer than I have, actually. But she wrote a white paper on it. Her website is designtopresent.com. Mine is echosvoice.com. But there's a lot of nuance to that, Christian, is the thing. I mean, you
Yeah.
could embed fonts in PowerPoint on Windows, but PowerPoint Mac would not recognize them. Now it
Right.
does. This has been a change just in the last couple of years that Mac PowerPoint can actually recognize those embedded fonts. The other thing is Microsoft used to let you embed a font into a template, but it didn't actually carry through to any files that you created based on the template. So it was very misleading and very
Hmm.
problematic. And so that has been fixed. So there are some things like that. But in addition, your font actually has to be licensed for embedding, because if your font maker, creator for your proprietary font has not enabled all of that, then you're still going to have issues. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of nuance behind it.
That makes sense, though.
A lot of nuance. Yeah. So
Yeah. Well,
that's where like my specific expertise comes in handy with templates and stuff, is because we
well,
have
I
to know
I
all
do
the
have
nuance.
you mentioned writing the book, but I do have to ask, as a PowerPoint MVP, are all of your contributions slide decks, or is it viewed as sacrilegious for you to create other content types?
No, I can create other content. That is that. No,
Okay,
I work in Canva.
I
I
just
work
want to
in
get
Google
that
Slides,
out there. All
Keynote,
right.
all the things. It's all about the presentations. But no, my
Yeah.
contributions, honestly, I moderate a Reddit PowerPoint group, and I think probably my biggest contribution these days is feedback to the product team about some of the designer and Copilot and things like that. So yeah, I'm out on the web on LinkedIn and answering questions and doing things there. And like I said, I speak at conferences, and like I was speaking at Presentation Summit a couple of weeks ago, and then we had a virtual version of the conference just this week. So I've been involved with that. Oh, I should tell you, in 2015, I gathered up a bunch of MVPs and some other people and said, okay, it's time for us to start a trade association. So I worked with them. I mean, it wasn't like I did it myself, but I consider myself the founder of the Presentation Guild. And so it's still going strong today. I have stepped down from the board, but I am still working on a certifications program. And so most of a huge chunk of time goes into that. So we developed industry standards, and like, what should a presentation developer know, presentation designer
Mhm.
know. It's very PowerPoint focused right now. We hope to expand that to other platforms and things as we move forward in future. But we have a specialist level certification and an expert level certification, and yeah, we've been working on developing membership. There are about 250 members, I think, right now, maybe around there. Um, yeah, so that's where people like me, if you're doing presentation design or that anything related actually for a living, it's maybe something to check out. We have a Slack channel where we all get on and answer questions, chit chat about business stuff, like that.
That's fantastic. No, hey, look, it's having helped build user groups throughout most of my career and running different user groups for years. Back when I lived in Northern California and moved up to Seattle, was on the board there for 8 years, and been here in Utah for 8 years, and have been on the user board, the user group board for all that time. That's I completely understand that whole model of identify birds of a feather in that area,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
more programmatic structure that you can put in place to, I mean, that's a great way. I'm always thinking in terms of, for people that are interested in becoming an MVP or becoming an instructional designer, or kind of like in that world, like, hey, go take a look and see if there are similar guilds or user groups or
hmm,
programs that are available in your area. And
hmm,
there tend to be, it's hard to find people these days. There are so many
yeah,
places that they could be hosting that.
yeah,
Even just looking for them out on the web. That's why having platforms like Meetup are so much easier to
It's
centralize a
not
lot
like
of that.
it used to be with CompuServe and Deja News. I mean, those are your options, you know?
Right.
And now there's a
Yeah.
million places. Yeah, we have we set up a website. They've actually redone it in the past year or so to make it a little easier for the members to access different things. But it's presentationguild.org, and you can find presentation specialists, you can find certified specialists. The certifications came about, and I have to give Glenna Shaw, she is a former PowerPoint MVP. She gets all the credit for starting that program for certifications. But I know it was high on my list to do. She was able to actually, we had her expertise to implement. I don't think it would have gotten off the ground without her. But the point is that I had a client way back in the day, a potential client who was asking me all this stuff, and he eventually asked me if I was Microsoft certified. And I was like, no, there's an MCSE, but that's not even that's not relevant. There's a
Yeah.
MOS specialty, but what I couldn't tell him is I tech edited that test. I wasn't MOS certified because I wrote the damn test.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't hire me because I wasn't certified. It's really difficult for PowerPoint specialists to be able to validate their skills, and it still is that way to this day, because when someone is hiring a PowerPoint specialist, I mean, everybody thinks they know PowerPoint. So it's like everybody claims to be an expert at PowerPoint, but
I know
it's
how to
not
use
the
20% of the features really well.
exactly right. Or
Yeah.
in the silo that you work in, you're probably your corporate expert, but maybe in a wider arena, you're not. And so it's really difficult to validate those skills. And so that was our goal with setting up the certifications program. Is it's a way for people to say, no, I really do know my shit,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yep.
So
No, that's great. Now to bring it all back around, so when you use the word guild, this is how much a nerd I am. I think of then guilds of like in Dungeons and Dragons, which was the first BBS that I paid money to be a member of, was for dungeon masters to share tips and
all
information.
right, all right, yeah.
So I can't believe I paid money for that. And that was like the first year of my marriage until my wife found out, like, what is this? What are you
I can't
doing?
believe you're still married is what yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
yeah, anyways,
we chose the word guild with intent because guilds are, the initial word for a guild was like craftsmen. It was a group of
yeah,
craftsmen, and that's what we consider presentation developers. Whether you're a speaker or whether you're a designer or whether you're a PowerPoint person or a VBA person like the MVP. I mean, you're still a craftsman working in that.
yeah.
So we chose guild very
Or a
intentionally.
connoisseur of lollipops for the Lollipop Guild.
There you go.
So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
Well, that's great.
we filed the paperwork. We set it up as a not for profit. It's not a C3. It's a C6. We're like the NFL trade organization. But yeah,
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah. Oh, into that world and understanding that, and that's not, you can't just sign up for to get those designations either. I was a co-founder in a nonprofit. It took a while to get our 501c3 status there, but yeah, it's
yeah,
well,
it was
no, hey, like I said, I appreciate people that understand that go to that length to go and create those community tool services groups
yeah,
to help people to do that. I mean, you get a lot out of it, like being part of that, helping start that, develop that.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, the best thing about the PowerPoint and the presentation community, quite frankly, is there is plenty of work for all of us. And it's that whole rising tide lifts all boats. So it is
yep,
a super cooperative community. We have people from slide design agencies trading business tips and, individuals helping other individuals because it's so much more cooperative than competitive. It's amazing. And it's a really wonderful thing about the community because it's not like that everywhere. And and we're not exactly graphic designers, so the Graphic Artist Guild doesn't quite meet our needs. It's not
yeah,
the same. There's
no,
definitely nuance in presentation design that doesn't come across
very
elsewhere.
few graphic designers that I've come across that didn't have the expertise over on that side. In fact, I had this request working with a client years ago where I had a design firm that I loved that was
Mhm,
very economical because they're based in South Africa, but
mhm.
did fantastic work. I said, hey,
Mhm.
I really need help in designing these templates. And what they did is they just created graphics and imported them
Right.
in, like No,
Right.
that's
Right.
it's not the same thing.
That's where it becomes such a specialty, and that's where my niche comes in, is because I get that from agencies all the time, and I have clients call me and hire me all the time to rebuild templates that their agency has provided, because the agency is, their specialty is design. It's not PowerPoint. And in fact, a lot of graphic designers don't like PowerPoint. Honestly, I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about it, I admit. But it's just a tool like everything else. It's just about
Yeah,
understanding your tool and knowing your tools and being able to push the limits on those tools. But you have to know the limits before you can push them. So that's where I come
exactly.
in. So I end up rebuilding a lot of agency designed templates just to make them more functional, um, uh, as well as designing our own and stuff. That's the other thing is, with PowerPoint, you want your content to shine. You don't want all your content slides to have stuff all over the
Right.
background. And you need to give users a structure that helps them, because a designer isn't intimidated by a blank slide, but users often are. Most people, who are not designers, they are a little intimidated by that. So you have to give them some structure and some guardrails to work within and to
Right.
help support that brand. Because as a designer, if you're just like you were saying, just flopping graphics on the slides, that doesn't help a typical user.
So I'm very much so I'm a governance guy, and one of the things that and when I used to go in and consult for companies and build project management organizations, PMO structure, I would come in and say, look, I've got templates, and I actually had physical, binder full of various templates, and I'm like, here,
Right.
these workflows, here's these swimming lanes, this is how they work together, here's this
Mm-hmm.
process, this is how you use that, and then I would tailor them for that organization. And it's the same with having templates that are branded for your organization. It's like having an agenda for a meeting. Anytime I
Yeah.
walk into your meeting, if I know that there's always the agenda, it has this structure, here's where I look, here's what's new, here's what we're going to go through.
Mhm.
It helps me then plan to know what do I need to do in advance, what the meeting is going to be like during, what do I need to do after with that. It's the same with a PowerPoint template. You can actually create it in a way that no matter what the idea is, if again, it's internally sharing information, for a consistent way of presenting your corporate brand and the ideas, your
Mhm.
products, your services to
Mhm.
an external audience to make sure that
Mhm.
it's consistent.
Mhm.
And
Right.
it's like when you're told when you're young and starting out in the business world, like dress for success. A
That's a
template is
good way
like
to
that.
put
It's
it. I should
dressing
use
for
that.
success.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. It really is
I
about
completely
just
just made
supporting.
that up. That's like I trademark that right now,
There
right
you go. I'm
here.
going to
Dress for
trademark it. Right.
success.
Yeah. No,
That's
it
all
really
me.
is just about supporting your brand and making it easy
Yeah,
for the users. And we usually try to save the sexy for the, like the intro slides, like the title slides and the section dividers and all that. And then keep those content slides very clean and simple so that so the content can shine and it's not all distracted with, all the stuff. But it can be challenging depending on the client, depending on the brand. And so, yeah,
yeah.
it's a thing. It's a thing. But
I
dress for success. I love that. Help your slide content dress for success. That's good.
exactly. Yeah,
Trademark.
no, I know about working with clients. Sometimes, yeah, it's really it can be frustrating to. It's like, look, all I could do is make these recommendations. Here's what I would do. No, we're going to go
Right.
this other way. Like,
Right.
okay, all right,
Right. Well,
here's my timesheet.
I mean, that's part of it. And I tell my clients that a lot of times. I'm like, look, it's your template. It's not mine. All I can do is give you recommendations for what I think is a best practice or what I think you should do. But ultimately, it's your decision. So,
Yeah,
like we always have to have the font discussion. Depending on what font they've chosen, we almost always have to have the font discussion because the design team will choose some random font and it's like, okay, this is going to cause you problems in PowerPoint. Let us do a font study and find something similar that's safe or safer that's not going to cause you problems. And
yeah,
and ultimately sometimes they choose to go with the proprietary one and it's like, okay, we can embed it, but it's going to cause you these problems because it's all or nothing. So when people bring in other content, it's going to embed all the fonts. Some of them won't be embeddable. They're going to get error messages, blah, 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 blah. I just want
right.
them to make an educated decision. So we have to have the conversation. It's their template, it's their choice. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
Client
know.
can't live with them, can't live without them, right?
Yep, yep. Well, so Echo, really appreciate your time. I always like to end by asking, like, where people want to reach out to you, connect with you. Where can they
Mhm.
find you? Where are you most active in social platforms? And where can we refer people?
I think the easiest place to find me is probably LinkedIn. Um, I've abandoned Twitter and I've abandoned Facebook. And I mean, you can hit me up on my website. There's a contact form if you need to. That's echosvoice.com. But LinkedIn is always a good place. I'm still there. It's not so political. So, yeah.
I have to say that politics aside, and this is somebody who's a marketing guy and does a lot of promotional activities. I'm kind of happy to see people that are abandoning social and
Oh,
getting back to real world
I
conversations. But yeah,
Yeah, I have not been on Twitter in a couple of years, and I've not been on Facebook in, oh, probably I cut way back after 2016, and then I, like, completely abandoned it around 2020, 2019, 2020. I'm just like,
yeah. See, I'm still very active on Twitter, but Facebook is just it's for me. I mean, it's just as bad as like going and looking at TikTok. Like it's just it
yeah,
just
yeah,
yeah. Anyway, that's
yeah,
another topic for
yeah,
another time. But
yeah,
Echo,
but
really
yeah.
appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you, Christian. I have had so much fun. It's always, yeah, it's been great to talk to you, and it's always good to get in front of people. So, hello, everybody.
And hopefully I'll see you at the MVP summit next year.
I know. Maybe next year I'll actually go. I haven't been for a couple years, so we'll cross our fingers.